If you ever wake up in the middle of the night and hear someone quietly sweeping your floor, do not open your eyes. You live alone, and whatever is holding that broom is waiting for you to look. I made the mistake of looking 3 nights ago, and now I am writing this because I know will not survive until sunrise. It started with a purchase I should have never made. 2 weeks ago, I moved into a small house on the edge of a quiet town. The rent was impossibly cheap, a detail I foolishly celebrated instead of questioning. The house was old, built in the late 1970s, with thick carpet, low wooden ceilings, and an eerie stillness that settled over every room the moment the sun went down. But for a guy who worked night shifts editing audio from home, it seemed perfect. Isolated, cheap, and completely silent. Also, I thought, on my 3rd night in the house, around 3 in the morning, I heard the sound for the first time. A slow, methodical scraping noise coming from the hallway outside my bedroom door. It sounded like stiff bristles dragging across hardwood. Swish, pause, swish, pause. At first, I assumed it was a stray animal that had crawled into the crawl space beneath the floorboards. I turned over in bed, pulled the blanket up to my shoulders, and tried to ignore it. But the rhythm was too precise. Animals do not sweep in a steady, deliberate cadence. Swish, pause, swish, pause. It continued for exactly 20 minutes before stopping. Abruptly right outside my bedroom threshold, I lay frozen in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for the handle to turn. It never did. After nearly an hour of total silence, I finally fell back asleep out of pure nervous exhaustion. The next morning, I checked the hallway. Nothing looked out of place. No dirt, no scratch marks on the floorboards, no sign of any intruder. I told myself I had imagined it, a vivid hallucination brought on by sleep deprivation and the stress of moving. To prove it to myself, I decided to set up a digital audio recorder on my desk in the hallway. I set it to record continuously overnight. If the sound happened again, I would have audio proof, or better yet, proof that my brain was playing tricks on me. That night, I went to sleep at 2 in the morning. I did not hear the sweeping. I slept straight through until 8 a.m. relieved. I sat down at my workstation, plugged the digital recorder into my computer, and opened the audio file. I fast-forwarded through the empty hours of silence. The waveform was flat, a straight line of quiet room tone. I was just about to delete the file when I noticed something strange at 3:17 a.m. The flat line broken into a distinct pattern. I put on my studio headphones and hit play. The audio opened with the familiar rasping sound, swish, pause, swish, pause. It moved slowly down the length of the hallway, coming closer to the microphone. But as I listened closely, turning up the volume, I realized something that made the blood run cold in my veins. Underneath the sound of the sweeping, there was breathing, heavy, wet, ragged breathing coming from whatever was holding the broom. And then, the sweeping stopped right next to the recorder. For 10 agonizing seconds, there was only the wet rasp of breath in the headphones. Then came a whisper. It was high-pitched, rasping, and stretched out like dry parchment being torn in half. It said, "I know you are sleeping. I am cleaning the floor for when you drop." I ripped the headphones off my ears and stumbled back from my desk, my chest heaving. The voice did not sound human. It sounded like something attempting to imitate human speech, using a throat filled with dust. I spent the rest of that day searching every inch of the house. I checked the attic, the basement, the closets, and the space under the floor. There was nowhere a human being could hide. The locks on the doors were heavy deadbolts, and the windows were painted shut from the inside. Nothing had been opened or tampered with. That evening, I decided I would not sleep. I bought 2 cans of high-energy drinks, set up a bright halogen lamp in the hallway, and left my bedroom door wide open. I sat on the edge of my bed with a baseball bat resting across my knees, staring directly down the illuminated corridor. 3 o'clock rolled around, then 3:15. At 3:17 exactly, the halogen light in the hallway flickered once, twice, and went completely dark. The darkness that filled the hallway was not normal dark. It was dense, thick, and suffocating. as if the light hadn't just been turned off, but swallowed whole. Then the sound began. Swish, pause, swish, pause. It was starting from the far end of the hallway, moving toward my room. I reached for my phone on the nightstand to turn on the flashlight, but the screen was dead. The battery, which had been at 90% 5 minutes earlier, was completely drained. Don't move, I told myself. Just stay still. The sweeping grew louder. I could smell something awful now. A stench that filled the bedroom, an iron, damp soil, and old copper. Swish, pause. It was in the doorway now. I squeezed my eyes shut. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to open them, to look at whatever was standing there in the dark. But a cold, primal voice in the back of my brain whispered that looking would seal my fate. I felt the temperature in the room drop precipitously. My breath turned into white mist in the air. Then came the sound of something dragging along the floor, coming right up to the side of my bed. The heavy, wet breathing was directly above my face. I could feel a cold, damp air hitting my forehead with every exhale of the entity. It leaned down. The stench was overwhelming. Don't open your eyes. For the love of God, don't open your eyes. A long, bone-dry finger dragged softly down the side of my cheek. The skin felt rough like sandpaper. Then the rasping whisper returned, leaning inches from my left ear. You are being very polite, it whispered. Most of them look. The ones who look leave so much mess to sweep up. I kept my eyes clamped shut, tears stinging the corners of my eyelids. My body shaking so violently, I thought the bed frame would rattle. The creature lingered above me for what felt like hours. I could hear the faint, dry rustle of whatever material made up its body, like dead leaves dragging across concrete. Finally, the heavy breathing slowly receded. Swish, pause, swish, pause. The sound retreated back down the hallway, slowly fading into the distance until it vanished entirely. When the morning sun finally broke through the bedroom curtains, the room temperature returned to normal, and my phone powered back on instantly. I ran out of the house without even putting on shoes. I got into my car and drove straight to the local diner in town, desperate to be surrounded by daylight and normal human beings. I sat in a booth with a cup of coffee, trying to gather my thoughts. I knew I sounded insane. If I went to the police, they would think I was having a mental breakdown. If I called my landlord, he would laugh and tell me I was breaking my lease contract. While sitting there, an elderly man in a faded worker's jacket sat down at the counter a few feet away. I overheard him talking to the waitress about the old properties on the North Ridge, the very area where my house was located. I stood up, walked over, and asked him if he knew anything about the house at 42 Blackwood Lane. The old man stopped stirring his coffee. He looked up at me, his eyes narrowing as he scanned my pale face and trembling hands. You living there, son? He asked quietly. I nodded. He stayed silent for a long moment, then gestured for me to sit down in the stool next to him. That house was built over the foundation of an old sanatorium that burned down in 1945, he said, keeping his voice low so the waitress couldn't hear. When they cleared the rubble to build residential homes 30 years later, they found a room in the cellar that hadn't been on any of the blueprints. It was a narrow stone corridor with no doors and no windows. Inside, they found 3 skeletons sitting against the far wall. My mouth went dry. What happened to them? Nobody knows, the old man replied, but the mortician said their eyes had been gouged out from the inside, and the floor around them was swept completely clean of ash. Even though the rest of the building was buried in black soot, the builders covered the hole with concrete and built your house right over it. Every tenant who has lived there since has broken their lease within 2 weeks, or vanished entirely. Did any of them talk about a sweeping sound? I asked, my voice cracking. The old man looked into his coffee cup and shook his head. The ones who talked about the sound always left within 48 hours. The ones who stayed, well, they never got a chance to talk to anyone again. If you hear it, son, pack your bags and don't spend another night under that roof. I left the diner and immediately called a moving company. I offered to pay double their standard rate if they could come that very afternoon to pack up my belongings. The receptionist agreed, telling me a crew would arrive between 3 and 4 p.m. I drove back to the house, parked on the street, and waited in my car. I was too terrified to step foot inside alone. 4 p.m. came and went. Then 5 p.m. I called the moving company back, furious and terrified. The receptionist apologized profusely, explaining that their truck had broken down on the highway and they wouldn't be able to send another crew until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I looked at the house. The sun was beginning to dip below the tree line. Shadows were stretching long across the overgrown front lawn. The dark windows of the upper floor looked like empty eye sockets staring down at me. I should have driven to a hotel, but all my equipment, my passport, my hard drives with years of work, and my wallet were still inside on my desk. I told myself I would just run in, grab my backpack with my essentials, and leave immediately. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the living room. The air inside felt impossibly heavy, freezing cold, and stagnant. I walked quickly toward my office down the hallway. My heart was pounding like a drum in my ears. I reached my desk, grabbed my laptop, pulled my passport out of the drawer, and stuffed them into my backpack. As I turned to head back to the front door, the heavy front door slammed shut on its own with a deafening bang. I ran down the hallway and grabbed the brass handle. It wouldn't budge. I flipped the deadbolt back and forth, but the door remained sealed tight, as if it had been welded into the frame. I threw my shoulder against the wood, once, twice, 3 times, but the solid door didn't even creak. I sprinted to the living room window and tried to throw it open. It was stuck fast. I picked up a heavy wooden chair and slammed it into the glass. The glass didn't shatter. The chair bounced off as if hitting solid steel, vibrating so hard in my hands that I dropped it onto the carpet. I looked at my watch. The digital numbers flickered, glitched, and suddenly froze at 3:16 p.m., even though it was barely 6 in the evening outside. Through the window, I watched the sunlight vanish instantly, replaced by an absolute pitch-black void. The lights throughout the house died at once. I was trapped. I backed up into the corner of the living room, pressing my spine firmly against the walls so nothing could get behind me. I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees up to my chest. 3:17 p.m. on my frozen watch. Swish, pause, swish, pause. The sweeping sound did not start from the far end of the hallway this time. It started from inside the closet directly across the room, from where I was sitting. The closet door slowly creaked open, inch by inch. The horrible smell of rotten earth and old blood poured into the living room, thick enough to make me gag. Out of the darkness of the closet stepped a figure. It was taller than any man, so tall that its head was bent at a sickening 90-degree angle to avoid touching the ceiling. Its body was draped in long, filthy rags that looked like decaying bandages. In its long, spindly hands, which ended in unnaturally long fingers with no fingernails, it held an ancient, dry broom made of bundled straw. Its face was a flat, featureless plane of pale, leathery skin, except for where its mouth should have been. Where the mouth was supposed to be, there was only a wide, vertical tear in the flesh, revealing rows of small, needle-like teeth. It had no eyes, just smooth, pale skin across its upper face. It stood in the doorway of the closet, its bent head tilting slightly from side to side, as if listening to the sound of my erratic breathing. Swish, pause. It took a slow, deliberate step toward the center of the room, dragging the broom across the carpet. I remembered the old man's words. I remembered the skeletons in the cellar. I knew that if I made a sound, if I tried to run, or if I let it know I was staring directly at its terrifying face, it would end me. I shut my eyes tightly. I sat in total darkness, listening to the creature move closer. Swish, pause, swish, pause. It was right in front of me now. I could feel the ice-cold air radiating off its body. The tips of the dry straw bristles swept gently over my shoes. Then it stopped. The wet, heavy breathing hovered inches from my face. I could hear the faint, sickening sound of its needle, teeth grinding against one another inside that vertical tear on its face. Open them, a voice rasped in my head. It wasn't speaking out loud this time. The words were echoing directly inside my mind. Open your eyes and look at what I have cleaned for you. I clamped my eyelids together, even harder, tears pouring down my cheeks. I pressed my teeth together, so hard I felt my jaw ache. It leaned closer. I felt a cold, dry hand grip my chin. Its long, spindly fingers squeezing my cheeks, trying to force my eyes to open by pulling back my eyelids. The strength in those thin fingers was terrifying, like iron clamps crushing my skull. "Look at me," the voice screamed in my mind, growing violently louder. "Look at me." I fought against the pressure with everything I had, squeezing my eye muscles shut until my entire face felt numb. For 10 agonizing minutes, the entity tried to force my eyes open, its claws scratching at my skin, leaving deep, bloody welts along my forehead and cheekbones. The pain was unbearable, but I knew that the moment my eyes opened and caught sight of its face, I would join the missing tenants beneath the concrete floor. Suddenly, the pressure stopped. The creature released my face. I heard the dry rustle of its rag-like garments as it stood back up to its full, unnatural height. "You are stubborn," it whispered softly in my ear. "But everyone opens their eyes eventually. You cannot sleep with your eyes closed forever. I will wait." I heard the slow, rhythmic sound start again. Swish, pause, swish, pause. It moved back toward the hallway. That was 3 hours ago. I am still sitting in the corner of the living room, typing this on my laptop with one hand while keeping my eyes tightly closed. I am using the muscle memory of my fingers to hit the keys. The house is dead quiet now, but I know it hasn't left. It is standing somewhere in the darkness of the hallway, holding that broom, waiting for my eyelids to grow heavy. My head hurts desperately, my arms are shaking, and my body is exhausted. I know that sooner or later, I will lose consciousness. I know that my body will relax, my eyelids will slip open in my sleep, and I will finally see whatever is standing over me in the dark. If you are reading this, and you ever move into a new house where the rent seems too good to be true, listen carefully at night. If you hear the sound of sweeping outside your bedroom door, do not investigate, do not record it, do not try to look, just run while your eyes are still open.